Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ted Dallas. I'm here moderating a panel discussion called Stronger Together, the Power of Partnerships. We have some really great partnerships here and partners here today, I should say. And what we want to talk about is how partnerships can be used to innovate and do things that folks can't do on their own. I'm a great believer of this in my day job and also in other work that I do, that working together, all of us can come up with solutions that are a lot more innovative than anything we can do by ourselves. My day job is I work as the President and Chief Operating Officer of Merakey, a human services provider that is headquartered right here in the Philadelphia area, but we provide services all across the country. I'm going to let the panel members here introduce themselves and talk a little bit about who they are and what they do and their philosophy and approach to partnerships in a moment, but wanted to start off a conversation we'll start with Sue Dougherty, the CEO of Manna. Sue, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. As Ted just said, I'm Sue Dougherty. I'm the CEO of Manna. Manna is located in Center City, Philadelphia, and we are all about food as medicine and making sure folks get access to a medically tailored meal and access to dietitians. We've been around for 30 years. We're growing leaps and bounds, and really we would not be able to do any of that without partnerships. So I'm really excited and looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks, Sue. Do you have any thoughts overall about partnerships and your approach to partnerships, just an overall philosophy you'd like to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the partnership it has to be right for the mission, right? It has to definitely have mission fit. And I think ultimately enhance the constituents or the clients, however, whatever you call who you're serving, enhance the lives of those and the focus of the organization.
Thank you, Sue. Josh Klaris, who's the Executive Director of North 10, which is a really exciting partnership that's in the Hunting Park and East Tioga section of Philadelphia. Josh, please introduce yourself. I think you may be on mute, Josh.
Apologies about that. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Klaris. Just personally, just as everybody gets to know each other here, I think it's important. I come to my role as Executive Director at North 10 after having been a former public school teacher, mostly in elementary school, kindergarten, and I was a 6th grade teacher and certified ESL teacher. I was a school leader and a principal. I was born and raised in New York City, and I'm a Philly transplant. I've been at North 10 for about 3.5 years now. And it's just really just been a culminating experience for me in my career. For those of you that don't know North 10, we were created in 2018 to enable residents in Hunting Park and East Tioga to live happy and healthy and civically engaged lives. Mostly North 10 considers itself a convener, bringing community partners around a strategic initiative for neighborhood improvement. We connect local organizations and individuals to resources, and we build capacity, mostly through running a facility called the Lenfest Center right near Hunting Park, in which we provide programming for youth and adults and community services.
Thank you, Josh. Our next panelist is Patrick Clancy, who is the President and CEO of Philadelphia Works.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. As Ted mentioned, I'm the President of Philadelphia Works, which are the city's workforce development board. We're the entity in the city that receives all the federal and state job training funds awarded to the city of Philadelphia. Our job is to figure out how to get people back to work and also build talent pipelines with employers. One of the bigger challenges we have during this pandemic is to figure out how to do that virtually in a system where not everybody has access. So, I'm thrilled to be here as part of the conversation today with our other presenters and look forward to the ongoing dialogue.
All right. And then our last but certainly not least, Ro Falcone, who is the Regional Director of EDSI.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, as everyone said, excited to be here. EDSI is a national workforce development provider that helps folks get jobs and better their lives. We've been a provider in the city of Philadelphia for over 25 years. And really, I think without partnership would not be successful and not to, we wouldn't be able to grow and help as many people without the partnerships that we've developed through the years.
All right, so thank you all. Now, the format for today is going to be a Q&A. I'll ask a few questions of our panel here to get the discussion going, and then hopefully we'll turn it over to some questions from the audience that we can try to answer. My first question is for Pat Clancy at Philadelphia Works. Pat, you have a slightly different role than some of the our other panelists. While you're certainly an active participant in partnerships, you also provide funding for them. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you look for when you're funding a partnership or when you're looking to partner with folks. Is there a particular type of person or type of organization? Are there traits that you find lend themselves more to partnerships?
Sure, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, Ted, we are the organization that has to, by the way we do our work, have partnerships, right? So we invest in organizations, particularly like EDSI, to really look at what is our mission. So our mission is to get people back to work. But we really not just want to get people back to work, but we also want to get them on a career pathway, right? So for us, it's about how do we continue to think through strategically with partners to make sure that our public investment, right? These are tax dollars, of which is about $75 million a year we invest in services throughout the city. And our goal is very simple, to help people not just go back to work, build their skill set, but also to continue down that road of constant education and growth. So we look for partners, one, that can be extremely flexible, but are willing to work with customers that are non-traditional, right? These are individuals who have been laid off. These are individuals who've come back from prison or through incarceration. We have high school students who maybe have dropped out prior to graduation. So we need partners that are willing to be patient and willing to meet people where they're at, but also wrap around those case management services, right? So it's not just about, can they do the academic work, which they are really smart people, but can they handle everything right now that's going on in their life? Can they handle the transportation challenges, the daycare challenges, the food insecurity challenges, the housing challenges? So we look for partners that can kind of work with us collectively, not just to educate people academically, but really to wrap around and assist people so they can be highly successful.
Thanks, Pat. Is there anything that is a red flag for you when you're looking for people to partner with?
Yeah. So one is, because we have federal and state funds, they have to be financially solvent, right? So first of all, you got to be able to manage the money we invest with you, but you also have to be willing to be totally transparent, right? We know in this work world, not everything goes as planned. So we look for partners who don't come to us and say, boy, we have 100% placement, or we can get everybody back to work. We want people that are honest, that are willing to work with us, but also willing to be different and take on other challenges as they present themselves. So if we see organizations that aren't flexible, that seem like they're not a good cultural fit, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more about that today from some of our other presenters, is what is your culture? Are you willing to take the extra step for customers, or when the day is over, sometimes you just pick up and move on? So we look at organizations that have that flexibility primarily.
So Josh, in a similar vein, North 10 is such an interesting project and one that I think holds so much potential. Can you talk a little bit about, as you were putting that together in those early stages, what was your approach to building that project, right? What were the things you were looking for, and what were maybe some of the bumps in the road or some of the things that were early successes for you?
Yeah. So what I would say, and I mean, I think that Pat's right. You're going to hear a variety of words again and again, and the one that the ones that I'll start with are trust and transparency. And I think that as an organization, even though North 10 came to the neighborhood in which we serve almost 13 years ago, we decided only 3 years ago to really expand what we were doing inside the Lenfest Center in a broader based way, and needed to make sure that we were transparent and open with everybody as that work was happening. So when we think about partnership, at first, the approach is, well, how are we representing that partnership, and what we expect from others, how do we model it out front? And I think that's a really kind of important ethos of the organization, is that we live by whatever it is that we're expecting anybody else to do. So being transparent, being good communicators, making sure that we're not just talking about trust, but exhibiting it, and showing people what it means to kind of put yourself out there and put yourself in a risky situation as individuals, to make sure that we're present, we show up, we consistently show up. And I would say that, because at the beginning, in any kind of endeavor, you can make lots of promises and think about lots of things that you're going to do, but really kind of being there day in and day out consistently, showing up is just vital to it all. Lastly, what I would say is that we were also really explicit, and my team, and if any of them are listening, they'll know that we're big, and I'm big into making sure that we set norms of behavior. So as soon as we were thinking about some early successes and partnerships, and one that I'll talk about a little bit more is a group of organizations in the neighborhood, a collaborative that we set together. We literally sat down and kind of wrote our agreement, our MOU. We specifically stated what our purpose was, why we were coming to get together, and we set our norms of behavior. Making sure we knew when our meetings were, what's the expectations of attendance, and what do we mean by those words, trust and transparency. Those are vital.
All right, great. Thank you, Josh. Next question is for you, Ro. EDSI has a long history of partnerships in all the states that you serve across the country. Is there one example, though, that where you think the partnership worked particularly well, or ultimately one that didn't work out as well as you wanted, and why did that happen either way?
Sure. Well, first I can talk about one that I think we're all really proud of, and that's the partnership with Merakey and Philadelphia Works in serving folks in recovery and trying to connect them to employment and training opportunities to better their lives in this very holistic approach. And I think for us, it worked well because we all share the same mission. And there's a culture match that makes us all committed and dedicated to the work that we do. And so EDSI recognized what our strengths are, what Merakey's strengths are, and also the need for Philadelphia Works to not just be there to fund us, but to support us in this initiative. And so I think we all knew the roles that we need to play, and then stepped up to do the job and for the program to be successful. Conversely, when organizations do not share the culture and core values, EDSI's core values are show up, smile, and support. And when things did not go well with a partnership, it was because we saw that those core values, there was no alignment. And so the struggle that we had in working with an organization proved to create so much hassle on the back end, where I would recommend for anyone to take the time to vet your partner, do the due diligence to really make sure they're a good fit, there's alignment, and most importantly, that from culture and core values, that everyone shares the same mission, and that understands, as Patrick mentioned, the work we do is hard, and we have to be willing to go above and beyond to really serve the customers and to make sure that all parties are committed and dedicated to doing that.
Thank you so much, Ro. Next question for Sue. Manna is just a great organization that is so well respected throughout Philadelphia and beyond Philadelphia. I guess I was interested in what might be some of the reasons that Manna might choose to partner with individuals, and what might be some reasons that you ultimately might decide not to partner with folks.
Sure, thank you. And of course, when my question gets asked, there's like sirens out my window, so I hope that that's not disturbing. Really, I think there's many reasons, right, that Manna would potentially look at a partnership. Sometimes, right, it's tempting because it may be a financial, right, and maybe a financial benefit, and you think, oh my God, that sounds really great. And as a community-based organization, sometimes that is enticing. But I think ultimately, and I know we're repeating words, I think the ultimate strategy really has to be Manna needs to know what the end game is going in, right? Because I think you can sometimes go in there with an idea, and then, as you're building the relationships and so forth, you kind of can get off track. So I think you have to go in to a partnership knowing early on what you want from that partnership. I think it's imperative that you stay in your lane. It can be easy to want to kind of go off the road a little bit, but I think focusing on staying in your lane, and then really kind of touching back on what Pat was saying about the wraparound services. I mean, the reality is Manna is serving a very vulnerable population. They're the sickest of the sick. They're at high risk. They're poor. They have many, many more needs than just medically tailored meals. That's our focus. That's what we care about, making sure they get proper nutrition education. But we know that's just a piece of the puzzle. So anywhere we can bring in a partnership that's going to help provide those wraparound services and take care of the whole person, right? We talk a lot about collaborative services and looking at ancillary services so we can complete that circle rather than just putting a Band-Aid on something.
Thanks, Sue. It made me think of something Ro was saying when we were talking about her EDSI's partnership with PWI and with Merakey. One of the things that's so great about that partnership is we all have our roles. We talk about staying in your lane. There are what we bring to the table, what EDSI brings to the table, and what PWI does, and it's all different but complementary things. And I think when that comes together, that's when a partnership can really work well together.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We'll go back to you real quick. So much of partnerships requires getting buy-in from folks there, right? So there's the people who show up on the first day of the partnership and then you maybe never see them again, and then there are the people who are making it run on a day-to-day basis. Can you talk a little bit about how EDSI gets that buy-in from folks and make sure that people are really committed to the partnership?
I think the first thing is to really identify what is the ROI. Really, what is the return on the collective investment that we're all making together? And as Sue mentioned, really, what is the end game? And focus on how this program or this project is going to be mutually beneficial to everyone. And so going through with each partner as to why you are selected, what is your role in this, and how we can better the lives of the folks that we're serving, how we can make an impact with the employer community. But really, I think, go through and define the roles and recognize the strengths of the partners and have those clear conversations. This is why we want you to be a partner with us. This is what you're good at. This is what your strengths are. Here's how we believe we can complement those strengths and how, it sounds a bit cliche, but we can be better together and how we can positively affect and impact more people by doing this in a collaborative spirit. So I think that's really critical from the beginning. And then, as Josh mentioned, just establishing the norms and talking about the expectations so that there is the buy-in and everyone knows up front what we're asking and what the commitment level needs to be.
And I would suspect that an honest relationship, one where you're going to have that straightforward conversation with your partner, is key moving forward. Have you ever had struggles or had occasions where that didn't work out?
We did, unfortunately. Unfortunately, some lessons learned in having those difficult conversations and recognizing that everyone's culture and how they handle and how they communicate are different. So I think early in my career I was a bit naive and kind of assumed some things. And I think the years have taught me to not assume anything and to set everything up front, establish the norms, the communication. And if it doesn't work, then to part ways sooner rather than later. The amount of stress, anxiety that can come from dealing with negative partnerships, it takes a toll on everyone. And so I think being upfront and having those conversations, setting the expectations, and then recognizing if it's not working, then we have to part ways and we have to make that change. And that can be difficult. And in the long run, it's in everyone's best interest and most importantly for us as an organization.
Thank you, Ro. We'll go back to Pat. I suspect a lot of the discussions that folks have had throughout the BPHL have also touched on the COVID pandemic that we're all living through. One question I'd be interested in is, has it changed the approach to partnership you had, whether it's your existing partners or looking for new partners? How has COVID impacted your ability to partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it really has. I mean, typically, prior to COVID, I would be able to go out and see an organization's facility. I'd be able to kind of get a sense of what the place was like as far as it welcoming, is it not? So now it's a whole lot more probing questions I have. So something as simple as, so what is your teacher turnover rate? Mm-hmm. How long have people stayed with the organization? Why do they like to work here? So really trying to, as Ro mentioned, if you can get those red flags early, then maybe you can save yourself some anguish. Because for us, as the steward of public funds, it's it's really important that we don't make many mistakes in that investment. So we have to make sure that the vendors that we contract with really understand that. And, you know, now everything's a Zoom, everything is, you could almost prop it up. So we spend a lot more time probing, and then we also ask for other people's opinion of that vendor, right? So typically maybe we wouldn't do a deeper dive around referrals or what people think of the organization. Now with COVID, we have to do our due diligence a little bit different. So that's really changed the way in which we pick partners. The other thing is that vendor able to do the services virtually, right? Not everybody is equipped to present information virtually. So it's really trying to see that flexibility again, but the deeper dive around red flags, I think, is more than ever something that we're taking time to look at.
And I think, Pat, what you're talking about also gets to my next question for Josh is, in a partnership, the roles and responsibilities of everybody. I think other panelists have touched on it. When you were putting North 10 together, how did you work to resolve those roles and responsibilities? How did you figure out who was going to be doing what, and making sure that everyone was playing to their strengths and minimizing their weaknesses?
Yeah, so much to say, and I kind of, to the last question to Pat's, I want to this is a panel, right? It's different, and the interaction is so different.
You can say I'm okay, Josh. You can say I'm right.
It's just the whole life in the time of COVID and being virtual here, and I'm thinking about that, and so I just to kind of piggyback on something Pat said that I think is something that I didn't even recognize during this time that could be a positive in COVID in terms of partnerships, and even to think about the beginning of forming partnerships is the ability to ask good questions. And in fact, how much that's been kind of enhanced these days, because you can't rely on other observational skills that you would when you're meeting with somebody in person. And so sitting on a video call with somebody and really trying to get to know them has challenged me in figuring out how to do that. And being a good question asker has been at the forefront of that. And so just Pat, that kind of reflects to this idea of, what is it in the beginning and the roles and responsibilities. And one of the things that I had been considering is this idea of coming in as an asker, right? When my role is literally we're interviewing, in the beginning of a partnership, you're getting to know me and I'm getting to know you. And so what are those things that are really important, and how do I ask those questions that are not these formal interview questions, because that's not really the atmosphere that you want, but what it is that I'm looking for, and how do I get a sense of those things. And so asking life stories, asking what brought people into the work to begin with. Ro talked about this idea of really, feeling like you want to be part of a partnership with someone because, you're like-minded and you have a shared vision. And so how do you figure that out? And so you get people's stories. And I think that there was a long time in the beginning of North 10 where we were just searching for those stories from people, from our neighbors, the people who walked into the Lenfest Center, and we were getting to know them. They wanted to know that about me. Actually, one of the great lessons that I've learned in life is that if you want to be persuadable, if you want to come into something and kind of get something and have somebody understand it, you have to be persuadable. And if I want to get to know you, you have to be able to get to know me. And to me, there's a lot of connection to that. And so, how I shared my background, who I was, recognizing that and putting it out. And as an organization, how that became part of the culture of the organization right from the beginning of the time that I was there, was fundamentally important in developing trust and being transparent, us saying what we knew, what we were about, being really clear with that internally in our own organization, because people didn't know, and they had expectations of us, or they thought they had assumptions of us, and we need to be clear on our end. And then it was much easier to ask the same questions of everybody else. Why are you at this table? What is this meaningful for you as a person? What does this mean for you as an organization in terms of your strategic planning? So to me, those were really important as partnerships get launched, but really so that you kind of trust and know that the answers you're getting are real and not just, talking points.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it. Next question is for Sue. Sue, what do you see in the future for Manna, or the food as medicine approach as all? Maybe give folks for who might not be as familiar what food as medicine means, and then how do you think partnerships will play a role in the future of food as medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before we get into that, I did want to just touch on something that Josh was just talking about in regards to partnership and COVID, is that, Manna, we are such a, for 30 years, our internal dialogue was like, once we get folks in the door, I think we had that experience with you, Ted, and they see the work that we're doing, right? Then we hook them, right? People like fall in love with our kitchen and seeing the kitchen filled with volunteers, which speaks a little bit to the fact of the food as medicine movement. And so COVID, that is all out the window, right? So we have to totally rethink how are we going to cultivate folks and relationships, whether it's donors or partners. It's a totally different time. We are definitely seeing at Manna that there's a delay in partnerships that we were cultivating because of that, right? Because we used to go visit each other or have coffee, whatever, tour each other's facilities, and we're rethinking that. So I just wanted to echo what Josh was saying, that it's so important now to develop relationships in a new way. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of that is virtual now. The future of Manna, the food as medicine is, we're going to change the world. That's what we all believe, right? Is that my background is I'm a dietitian. And so what we're doing at Manna and what we're advocating for is that forever, well, I shouldn't say forever, but certainly since the 60s, healthcare providers they prescribe diets, right? So you go in the hospital, something happens, you leave the hospital, you get your discharge orders, and you get told that, you have to go here for your chemo, your radiation, your dialysis, physical therapy, occupational therapy. Here's your medications. Oh, and here's this really specialized diet, not like, oh, go eat better, but, oh, you have to have a 4-gram potassium, 2 grams sodium, 4-gram phosphorus diet. Like, good luck, bye. And so there's no way for folks to access that. So that's what we do here at Manna, is that we provide that nourishment and that right nutrition to help people battle their illness. But it's not recognized as part of treatment. It's not covered through insurance. And so really, in order for us to succeed and have that ultimate win and win that battle to get a prescribed diet, recognized just as any other prescription, I really see critical our partnerships in the future are around research and data, because that's just not out there. There's just not a lot of data to support. I mean, we published the first of its kind research in 2013 that showed the impact of providing a medically tailored meal and the impact on health outcomes and healthcare costs. And that's gotten some traction around the country, but we need a lot more data, and we need a lot more partnerships to make that data possible.
Great, Sue. We are heading towards the end of our before we open up for Q&A. So I just wanted to ask one last question for the entire panel, and I'll ask each of you to comment on it. Is we've heard a lot about culture fit. We've heard a lot about honesty and open relationships. But looking back at all the partnerships that you've had, is there one key takeaway that you want everyone to know? Is something that you think is a critical thing, or something you might have done differently had you known back then what you know now? So start with Josh.
Thank God.
I'm going to just echo a little bit of what I've already said, but I think it's an important. I wish I had known since the beginning that to be at the forefront of saying who I am, and for me the importance of social justice and why I'm doing the work is just fundamentally important, and putting that on the table from the beginning. The vulnerability, the kind of honesty, and to me that's the connection to the trust part. But I would just reiterate, bringing myself to a partnership and making what's important to me evident is key.
All right. How about Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Josh, you're a tough one to follow up, by the way, because I was going to say exactly that. But one of the things I've learned is that, you sometimes have to follow your gut, right? I mean, we live in a world where people do a lot of writing to us. They send us information. They have glossy information. But sometimes, you've been around long enough to know whether or not someone's really real with you. and they're telling the truth. So digging deeper into that cultural norm piece is something that, if I would spend more time doing. I've been a president here about 3.5 years, workforce development about 30 years. Prior to that, I studied to be a priest, right? So you begin to get a sense of listening better. And I know, isn't that a shock to you guys out there? Oh, he'd be a priest? Could have been a bishop, not just a priest. But that's another session, which isn't this one, by the way. But it's that probing and listening thing that I think throughout the years, I've been learned to figure out what are the sort of the keys around listening better.
I think
the audience want to stir up the bishop question, at least.
I think PWI's gain is the priesthood's loss, Pat. So, all right, Rose, same question to you.
Sure. I think something that we've learned is to try to be proactive in looking for partnerships and not reactive. So if there's a proposal that comes out or an opportunity, have someone in mind, start establishing partnerships and have the great discussions around innovative ideas, what we can do together. And so I would just recommend being proactive. And that's where we are as an organization, is really trying to look for partners prior to an opportunity. And maybe when we speak together, we can think of great innovative ideas that can be mutually beneficial and help the community.
All right. And then last but not least, Sue.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I echo everything that was just said, and trust being a key, but I think also really having a full understanding of motive, right? Like not just your motive and for your organization, but we, certainly Manna has definitely had its share of experiences of partnerships going bad that, sometimes it's that the motive, not that it's a bad intention, but it's you're not on the same page with that kind of that end game. And so I think, specifically for a community-based organization, when we had a potential partnership with a much higher institution within the city that has a lot of, we don't have the marketing dollars and the PR and so forth. And so there was a lot of enticement, but at the end of the day, we didn't have the same motives. So I think really understanding that end game and motives, and if I had to do things differently in the past, I would echo Pat, and trust your gut, right? I think that's a big takeaway.
So Ted, when do we get to you question? So Ted, can't we ask you a question? You have to unmute, Ted.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Pat. Ask me a question.
So obviously, we've been blessed to have you as our facilitator here, but you also have an extreme knowledge of a lot of different systems, right? So obviously, we had a chance to work together at the state of Pennsylvania when you oversaw Department of Human Services, and that's been a lot of your history. But in your role at Merakey and your previous roles, what have you known about partnerships, and what would you say have been some of the challenges that you face? Like you're one of the smartest guys I know, and I do joke around with you, but you pick up on things very quickly. So what do you see as sort of a critical part of partnerships?
So I think there are probably a couple things for partnerships that I see. One is making sure you clarify the purpose of a partnership, right? It seems like an obvious thing, but sometimes it's not 100% clear why you're getting together to partner, right? There are folks who say, oh, we should really work together, but really getting that purpose down and starting with the why and what is the problem you're trying to solve. And then I think the other thing is a lot of times partnerships they sometimes get into the trap of mitigating the symptoms of the issue you're trying to get to, and spending a little bit of time about creating that partnership to address the root causes, I think is the difference between an okay partnership and a really great partnership that gets to hear the underlying issues that are causing the issue that we see, particularly in the human services realm, but addressing those root issues. That I think is a lot of times getting that defined right and getting the right people at the table to do that. That's the difference between just an okay partnership and a fantastic partnership. So thanks for that curveball, Pat, but appreciate it. We have some questions coming in from the audience that I promise we have to get to. The first one is, where do you all get your inspiration for partnerships? Or how do you, when you're coming up with partnerships, how do you think of them? How do you conceive them? And where do you draw your inspiration?
I'll go. I think for EDSI, it's recognizing a need and then understanding that we can't be everything to everyone. So how do we solve this need? And how do we get the right partnerships together to make sure that we can solve the need, we can be innovative. And so I think that's how we look at developing strong partnerships and innovation.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I'll, as is me, like make a little personal and then connect it to North 10. But like I said, I started as a teacher, and that can be a very isolating role. And I think one of the best and most formative experience that I had as a teacher was actually opening up my classroom, being a co-teacher and having a partnership within a classroom. And that's something that was just a remarkable experience for me personally, incredibly impactful for the students, and actually transformed how I viewed education and breaking down the silos of classrooms and the four walls so that there are these partnerships among teachers and the belief in collective efficacy and the improvement of the school movement. If anybody's interested in that, happy to have that whole conversation on the side. But coming to North 10, the concept to the beginning of North 10 was that there's always remarkable work going on inside communities. And there's a ton of strength, but all too often they happen in isolation or in silos, whether or not it's for healthcare, whether or not it's for education and learning services for youth, whether or not it's, in workforce development. And that one of the struggles that communities have is actually bringing these things together. And so my inspiration and the inspiration of North 10 in itself is that an organization to be put in the middle that convenes these experts in the community is actually fundamentally important to neighborhood revitalization and improvement. So a lot of the inspiration that comes at the core of North 10 comes from that concept.
We're also getting some questions about, is it, to the extent is it harder as a nonprofit to be innovative or to partner with folks because of limited funds? So I think that is a reality of the nonprofit world, but maybe ask the question this way: how do you all deal with that, with the limitation in funding? If you're not a Fortune 500 company with unlimited resources, how do you address that as a nonprofit?
So I'll jump real quickly, but move to others. I mean, we look to leverage, right? So we look at other partners that have the ability to leverage our investment. We know that we don't have a lot of money. It sounds like we do, but our need is so great. So we look at other partners that could pay for other things that maybe we don't have to pay for, and then we can invest elsewhere. So for us, it's about leveraging and knowing how to do that in a way that makes the most sense for the partnership.
And I can certainly jump in. I think one of the things as a nonprofit is I think getting creative, right? And so often you'll see funders or even donors may get excited about a partnership between multiple organizations. And so fundraising for that specific partnership that, again, is ultimately going to enhance the services that you're both providing to a similar population, I think can actually be a win for fundraising as well.
Yeah, it really is playing to those strengths. And just following up on something that Pat said, it really is finding folks that can bring different things to the table, and that multiplier effect. I think that's where the innovation occurs, where because you don't have the resources to do everything yourself, you can really try to find ways to get other folks to come together and be greater than the sum of the parts. All right, we have a question here that is, having worked in academics, nonprofits, and direct patient care, I've seen time and time again, this is not me, this is the question, how difficult it can be to work together across disciplines to solve common problems. The question is really getting to turf issues, about how to manage across those different organizations any turf issues that may have, that this is my job or it's not your job. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
So I would say, and then I know Ro's really ready to go on this, but it's all about the ego, right? So my sense is, how do you begin to talk to people one-on-one to alleviate the threat, right? Because when you get in front of a larger group and you start to, place your ego a little bit, people sometimes don't want to interact anymore. And then it gets to be behind the scene, they start complaining and do their thing. So I would say, as best you can, you go after that on sort of a one-on-one basis to get people's understanding of why this partnership is important.
Yeah, and I would just echo some of that. I think from the very beginning, setting the expectations, setting the roles, and clearly defining the roles and responsibilities from the beginning. The relationship that we have, Ted, with Merakey, you were the Director of Health and Human Services. You were you had all this wealth of information, yet with our partnership, you stayed in your lane as CEO of Merakey. And, I respected that because there was an understanding that this is your role. Here's how Merakey is going to help. Here's what EDSI is going to do. And it really set the foundation for a wonderful partnership because it was clearly defined and there were expectations and roles that everyone was on board with because they knew together we could do some amazing things.
That was very nice of you to say, Ro. I appreciate it. Are there any other thoughts on this particular question before I move on to the next one from the audience?
I would just quickly.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to quickly add to Ro's statement that the expectations, the memorandum of understanding, I think really also accountability. I think that's the other key piece is who is accountable for carrying out those expectations. And I can certainly tell you we'd be here forever if I gave you the whole story, but a memorandum of understanding literally saved Manna's research from happening. And if we had not had that document, we wouldn't have actually followed through with our research that was published. But I would say accountability is a big deal.
I was actually going to say the exact same thing. That what we say around North End is also it's mutual accountability, right? And MOUs are so fundamentally important. It's what you expect of us, and it's what we expect of you, and how we make sure that we are mutually accountable to each other. Cool.
All right. So another question from the audience is, what are the signs of a negative partnership? How does one know it's time to part ways with a partner?
Go ahead, Ro. You've done that multiple times. Broken heart. Go ahead, Ro.
Well, I think you just touched on the accountability, and when people start blaming, I think that's when you create that's when you see the challenges that kind of manifest itself early on. Is when you're going through clearly the MOU, what are expectations, and then you start talking about accountability, and they're starting to blame and make excuses. And I also think it's about mutual respect. There's a way that we expect to have great conversations and to communicate with one another. And anytime that gets crossed, I believe the relationship is over. And that's something that I think we've learned is the importance of that mutual respect and the importance of the accountability, the mutual accountability, and that, again, there's no blame. We're in this together and we're looking to accomplish the goals together.
What I'll add to that, and I agree, and the only perspective that I've learned to kind of bring to it also is, conflict is normal and natural. It's going to happen in any relationship, right? And so partnerships are relationships, and so you're going to hit these barriers, and it's kind of how you come through that, or the commitment to the partner or partners on how they deal with those conflicts and come out the other side and are both better for it, that I think are real indications for me. And so, it kind of starts off nicely, but then you get to that moment in which things are not feeling so well or keeping you up at night and you can't figure out how to get through a meeting, or you walk out of a meeting and it just feels wrong, to the gut part that Pat was talking about. But then it's like, okay, so let's be candid with each other. Let's have one of these conversations. And to me, it's like, if it doesn't then get better and it doesn't then improve, and then all those things that were just said are coming into play, right? But how people deal with conflict and how they learn from it, to me, is really important.
One of the other questions we have from the audience is, what happens when you're up against folks who are primarily focused on their own needs and aren't able to collaborate easily? What are some of the strategies to address that? I'll put my 2 cents in first, that before turning it over to the panel. That really gets to not only having the right people there, but getting to the why and getting to the shared mission, right? And I think one of the ways that you can avoid having that problem, which does happen, is making sure that you're very clear about what it is you're trying to do and what each person's role is going into the partnership, and getting to that shared understanding that helps avoid some of those problems down the road. But I'll turn it over to the panel as well. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would say I would totally agree with you, Ted. When I see things go awry, it's because clarity is not there. So people think it's somebody else's job to have done. The accountability of, all right, who specifically is going to do it? Otherwise, it becomes nebulous, and then everybody thinks it's especially if it's not going right, then it's really somebody else's job. So I would think, clarity, specific accountability is really important.
And I would just jump in and say that, I think pointing, if someone comes to you with a potential partnership and it's not in your lane or in combination with your mission, point them in another direction, right? I mean, like that is, I think, certainly a nice way to say, this may not be right for us, but I could direct you or connect you with folks that may be interested in that partnership.
You're way too nice, so I wouldn't do that. I'm joking.
What I would say actually in this is that, so to me, a little bit back before, like this is a good time to kind of think about some good questions to ask your partners about what's going on. So what you are making, what the assumptions are that, they're primarily focused on their own needs. Like there should be some explicit questions asking for that. And I would say that from my experience, particularly when working with people within large bureaucracies and institutions, that's very complicated, right? And so like the partnerships that I've really come across that have been the least successful are when you're dealing with these large institutions and like smaller departments within those institutions. And so all of a sudden you realize that the smaller department that you're working with actually doesn't have the power to make the decisions or do the things that you think that they should be doing because they're part of this large institution. But in fact, they're not, the one who makes that particular decision on something. And so kind of having that really clear understanding of who it is who your partner really is within that larger institution is to me really fundamentally important when you're talking about really powerful statements like they're primarily focused on their own needs, right? And so, that is something that I think is complicated. And again, I draw on a little bit of my experience having been a principal in the New York City public school system, that you work with other principals, but you're also part of this huge bureaucracy, and what they're able to do and not within that bureaucracy is questionable sometimes, right? The larger institution controls a lot of it.
All right, so I think, and as we're just being conscious of time, I have one last question that I swear is actually a question we got that I want to ask everybody, all of our panelists. And the question is, all the groups here do amazing work for our communities. Where can I find out more information about the work that you do? We couldn't set up a better ending question for the panel discussion here. Start with Josh.
So being a somewhat smaller institution and trying to get a new website up and running that really communicates what we're doing is a struggle. So actually a little bit of a pitch. And this maybe is a good place to say it, but we are looking for someone who can code in InVision, a new thing. Anyway, that's a whole different set. But we have a website, www.north10phl.org. You can get some information. Also, we have a website specific for the LenFest Center, lenfestcenter.org, that talks more about our direct programming. In the brochure, you're welcome to reach right out to me as well.
All right, thanks, Josh. Patrick.
Yes, we are excited to say we have www.philaworks, PHILAWORKS, philaworks.org. We are the city's workforce development board. That website will connect you to everything we do as a workforce board, all the services we offer, all the partners we have, all the opportunities for both employers and job seekers. It's a great website. We redid a couple of years ago, very interactive, very exciting. So please tap into that website. And we'd be happy to assist you in any way we can.
Great. Ro, how about EDSI?
Thanks, Ted. Yes, so we can be found at www.edsisolutions.com. And again, as Josh mentioned, please feel free to outreach to me directly. We are always looking for great partnerships. So thank you.
Sue, how do folks find out about Manna?
Thank you. www.manna, PA, so MANNA, PA.org. And certainly you can connect with me through that website as well and follow us on social media as well.
Great. And if anyone's interested in Merakey, it's www.merakey.org. So we have locations all over, and we're happy to work with anybody who's interested in helping folks. I think we are getting close on time here. We might be running a little bit over. So I think that is all for today. I just wanted to thank our panelists for a great discussion and for their partnership in real life as well. We couldn't do things we do every day without working together. So thank you all very much for everything you do, and thanks for participating in the panel today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.